Welcome everyone to What the Force, and welcome to a new episode of Once Upon a Time in the Outer Rim. And with me today is Alex Kane.
Hey, what's up?
Alex, thanks for joining. And we're going to be covering Mandalorian Episode 7, Chapter 7, The Reckoning.
It was a good one. It was really fun. It was...
written by Jon Favreau and directed by Deborah Chow. It was really cool. And just to let you know, this series of episodes covers The Mandalorian from a connotative, genre-specific, as well as mythic perspective. And we, have very much been enjoying this series on Disney+. It's been a lot of fun. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to keep up with this or any other What the Force content. Okay. Of course, this is going to be spoilers for this and all of other episodes. But Alex, what's our recap?
In Chapter 7, The Reckoning, Greef Karga reaches out to make Mando an offer. If our masked protagonist kills the Imperial client, Werner Herzog, from the beginning of the series, he'll be granted amnesty for his recent betrayal of the Bounty Hunters Guild. The Mandalorian returns to Sorgan to recruit Cara Dune to help with this new commission, which is sure to end with a big Magnificent Seven-style shootout. The pair then flies to Arvala 7 and asks Quill, who repaired Mando's ship in Chapter 2, to watch over Baby Yoda while they're off doing the job. The two bounty hunters draw their blasters, rattled, at the sight of the newly repaired IG-11, the droid Mando blasted back in Chapter 1 to save Baby Yoda's life. Turns out the IG unit's been reborn, reduced to a state of childlike innocence by Quill, who found and repaired him. He serves the two strangers hot tea. Quill assures them Baby Yoda will be safe in the droid's care. During a friendly arm wrestling match between Cara and Mando, the two locked in a draw, the child intervenes using his growing force powers and begins to strangle Cara through sheer will. "That is not okay," Cara says once the creature's released its hold on her. "It almost killed me." IG-11 and Quill accompany the Mercs and Baby Yoda to Navarro, where both Greef's guild outpost and the client await them. The band of travelers, minus IG-11 who stays with the ship, ride to meet Greef, who's brought along a security detail of fellow bounty hunters. At night, as they all plot to assassinate Herzog's character, great winged beasts descend on them, attacking viciously. One of the dragon-like creatures bites Greef, leaving a poisonous gash, which Cara says will likely prove fatal. But Baby Yoda again gets involved, this time using his miraculous touch to heal the wounded bounty hunter. When morning comes, Greef slays his own guards and confesses he'd been planning to double-cross Mando and take Baby Yoda to the client. The child's act of selflessness has changed his mind, and so they formulate a new plan. Quill will escort the child back to the starship, while Greef and Cara deliver Mando in handcuffs, along with Baby Yoda's empty perambulator, to Herzog and his small army of stormtroopers. All's going smoothly until the Heavy shows up. Moff Gideon, a ruthless Imperial officer with a squad of black-armored death troopers. A storm of blaster fire is unleashed on the client's location, killing the sinister imp loyalist as well as the white-clad stormtroopers charged with protecting him. "I see nothing but death and chaos," he says of the galaxy in the wake of the Empire's defeat, a few moments before meeting his end. When Gideon's forces overhear Mando urging Quill to get the child aboard the ship right away, a pair of imps fly out into the desert on speeder bikes. While the Moff's making his showy entrance in a howling TIE fighter, Quill and Baby Yoda are shown lying on the ashen ground just outside the Razor Crest. Baby Yoda is seized by the troopers and the camera zooms in on a motionless Quill. Cut to black.
Yeah, it was weird. We got a cliffhanger.
Yeah, yep.
I guess this just means like it was a two-parter.
It feels like a two-parter.
We'll get some resolution next week. But kudos to me to calling that death and rebirth cycle for our IG-11 units.
Yeah. You pretty much called that play-by-play a long time ago. Yeah.
What, episode 1? Yes.
Yep.
Little pat on my back for that, because wow, have I been wrong this week. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about kind of thoughts, feelings on this episode before kind of digging into kind of the genre stuff. This one might be a little bit lighter because I think we're waiting for a lot of resolution with episode 2, and we want to kind of see how these things play out. That of the part 2, so episode 8 of this series, the finale. Okay, so I felt like it was altogether a very tight episode. It enhanced my, I don't know, knowledge of the galaxy. Like literally we open and like, you know, hey, I guess you're never written off from necessarily the Bounty Hunters Guild. Like if they need you, they'll give you a call. Like to me, that was so interesting, even though he planned to betray him like the whole time. It was kind of interesting that, you know, there was still this like, I don't know, hope out there, you know, that he could be redeemed to the code of the bounty hunters. And then we also got, you know, Cara Dune like bare knuckle fighting in the like little wood cantina that was on the one planet where they hung out with the village.
Yeah, Sorgan.
And
yep.
Yeah, he didn't even drop in to say hi to Omura, like give her like a little like nod in his helmet, I guess. Maybe on the way back when he drops off Kara, like because he promised to do that. Maybe we'll see that. That would be cool.
He could blow her a kiss without taking off the helmet and just blow a kiss.
Yeah, literally. Like the last episode made us question if maybe he's had a romantic relationships before or not. So we'll see. Going back to Quill was also like a really interesting thing. Like literally he trusts these people with not only his own life, but also the life of the thing that he finds to be the most important thing in the galaxy. The thing he's willing to like kill others, you know, burn his own reputation. This is the most important thing in the galaxy, Baby Yoda. And Quill, of course, is filled with wonderful nuggets of amazing information, and how he views the galaxy far, far away is absolutely wonderful. We find out he was previously a slave of the Empire. We found out he worked at a genetic farm or something at one point. We find out that he also has skills in robotics to be able to reprogram and train IG-11. IG-11 is adorable as he's like learning how to feed the little like mounts that Quill takes care of. Like there's just so many wonderful moments. And like the most interesting part was when they broke the fourth wall and IG-11 offered the audience some tea. Like, here's a hot beverage. By the way, this episode is coming out right before The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, a day before, basically. 24 hours.
Yep. Yep. What did you think of like that first little bit?
Yeah, I loved it. I think that it's important that you pointed out Mando is very trusting of Greef to be like, oh yeah, they're offering me like a great deal. Of course I'll come back. Which is a trope in a lot of crime movies, you know, like in, you know, Goodfellas, Joe Pesci, you know, humiliates. Well, they kill this guy who's a made man in the mafia, and the mafia reaches out to him, you know, I don't know, a few months later, and they're like, we're going to make you a made man, Joe Pesci. And he's like all excited. And of course, it's revenge. You know, he walks right into a trap. This feels like that trope a little bit, you know, like why would Mando go back to the place where he shot up like half their members, you know, but he does. And it turns out to ultimately be for the benefit of everybody except for, I don't know, Greef's little band of henchmen. But yeah, I mean, I really liked the Quill stuff. I thought that, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And this is like a really good use of Deborah Chow yet again. You know, the sort of episode 3 was sort of like the kettle, you know, boiling over and things starting to hit the fan. This was like a whole, you know, like powder keg going off. Like this is sort of the pinnacle of the season as far as action and conflict kind of coming to a head. It felt good.
Well, and like character moments too, like Quill, you know, not willing to do things a certain way and really testing the Mandalorians' like concepts of how things should be. Kara like going along with things almost reticently as long as she's going to be protected, you know, in the end. Like there was just some really interesting things that were happening from a character perspective and what the Mandalorian was willing to do to protect the baby.
Yeah. I like that understanding that's between Mando and Kara, which is that, you know, they're not really just working for the money. She's like him in terms of she has a code and she has like a spiritual thing going on where, you know, she's on a certain mission in her life and her journey. And, you know, she's like, you're going back there? Like, no, I'm not that stupid. Sorry. Like, you're on your own. And then he's like, it's an Imperial. And she's like, okay, I'll get my coat, you know. I enjoy that kind of, you know, they both really hate the Empire, you know, this thing that is supposed to have been dead but won't seem to die. I really like that relationship with them, that they have this understanding, you know, kind of like in a Western, you'd have the, you know, which side did you fight for? And, you know, that comes up a lot. And, you know, even recent Westerns, like, you know, Tarantino movies and stuff, you know, it matters who you fought for, even though the war is over, because there's history there. Yeah, like
Quill was an Imperial slave. Like that was significant.
Yeah, she's like, you worked for the Imperials, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, and he's like, correction, I was an indentured servant. Like, you know, like I really liked him standing up for himself. That monologue is really beautiful.
Like literally it was, oh man, it was literally the conversation that Padme had with Anakin when she first meets him, except reversed. So she said, you're a slave, and he's like, I'm a person.
Yeah.
My name is Anakin. Like, it was reversed of that. It was like, you were part of this institution. Ugh, you were evil. And he's like, no, seriously, I had no choice.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like
it was that scene.
There was that dichotomy in the conversation to show the binary reality of the fact that you can be both things. And maybe you subscribe to the fact that you had no choice in the matter, but you were still part of the machine.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
You know?
Yeah, it's like in both cases you have the you know, mature woman figure, but who's kind of, you know, not entirely sure of the other person yet, and saying like, you know, oh, I'm kind of horrified by your situation, like, you know, and
or the presumption and the attempt to correct the presumption doesn't necessarily mean that both aren't true.
Yeah, it's a very it's the Joseph Campbell thing, right? It's like, you know,
it is,
you know, Quill,
like we know we're telling part of the myth when two things are true at the same time.
Yeah,
we know we're telling we know we're telling the Mask of Eternity when two things are true at the same time.
Yeah, and he was part of the machinery of Empire, but, you know, people don't always have a choice. Yeah, that's very Star Wars.
Really. Very, very, very Star Wars. Yeah. Yep. And then, you know, we get the breaking of the fourth wall of the T. Mando still does not trust IG-11. I think that IG-11's actions as a rebuilt man, metal man, will need to speak for themselves. Maybe we'll get that in episode 8. I think that would be really cool if he like came to the rescue as guns ablaze.
Yeah, actually, I had that same prediction that, you know, they've been hammering home for 2 or 3 episodes straight how much he hates these machines because of what happened to his family in his youth with the Separatists. And I think that, you know, it would be really cool if IG-11, you know, feels like, oh, my master is hurt out there or unconscious or was killed or whatever. And then also rescues Baby Yoda in the process. And then Mando is like, oh, I made assumptions about somebody I didn't know. You know, that's a nice lesson, right? If, of course, we don't know that that's going to happen, but it would be nice to see the droid save the day.
No, but it feels like that's what they're saying, you know, like they're saying, you know, people can learn from mistakes.
Yeah.
People can grow up. People can learn.
Yeah.
especially like with that little montage of him like learning how to just even function.
Yeah.
Which was like, he was like a little baby.
He was a baby. Yeah. He's like a 1-year-old learning to walk. Yeah.
Yeah. And like learning how to feed the blurgs. Like,
yeah.
It's just so cute. Oh. I love IG-11 so much. This episode hit on all the, we've got a deal. We're posseing up. We're getting a crew together. Like all of the solo feels, in universe. It had a lot of that mafia deal gone wrong feel, especially like when we had the double cross of Griff's men, and then we also had the shoot up of the client's, location by the death troopers, which is kind of really interesting because we had these like emaciated stormtroopers in white armor that is dirty, and then we have these pristine, Rogue One death troopers blowing up this like location and killing Werner Herzog, this old Imperial, who's literally like, I just need the child. Show me the baby.
Yeah.
And like Werner Herzog has these amazing lines like, why don't we have a drink to celebrate the completion of this narrative?
A libation. Yeah.
A libation, yes. Have a libation to complete the
I retweeted something on Twitter. Somebody said it's nice that they let Werner write his own lines for this episode, and it really feels like he did. He says like, I see death and chaos. Like, okay. His name's Werner Herzog. It's canon.
Like I literally think like that was in like the Mando clips or something from Celebration. Like, I see death.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Has the world changed much from the revolution or whatever? I see death and chaos. Like, that's literally like his thing. I think he's dead. I think unless Baby Yoda like comes in there and like we literally have like a D&D cleric who can bring people back from the dead potentially.
Yeah. It's fascinating. There's like a lot of new in this series, but yet also like the typical Star Wars thing with like the droids and the cyborgs, right? Like
have we ever seen anyone poisoned before in Star Wars? I'm literally trying to rack my brain.
Yeah.
If we've ever seen anyone poisoned.
Interesting. I guess episode 2, she gets the dart, Zam Wessel.
But she was never hit though, and that was like a dart meant to kill. Or Zam Wessel was killed. Yeah,
it's kind of a poison thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it probably was a poison. Yeah, she said it was poison. Yeah, you're right.
But I can't think of any other time. Just that the saber.
Yeah,
dart.
It's just not a thing that's used very often.
Yeah.
Maybe in Clone Wars, maybe I could like rack my brain and think of when somebody was maybe
a lot of
poisoned.
stuff happens in Clone Wars. It's possible. Yeah. They might use those darts again. I mean,
yeah, still super cool. Like, Baby Yoda comes up there, just like pops on that healing, and literally it like disappears, which is like, wow.
Yeah. Which even that situation of like sitting around a campfire and having like dragons descend on them, like that's a very sort of D&D like dungeon master thing to happen too, right? Like kind of just out of nowhere.
Especially when somebody says, well, nothing's going to go wrong now. And then attack.
Yeah.
It had a lot of Deus Ex Machina, like, unfortunately, in that moment.
Yeah.
Nothing could go wrong now. Everything goes wrong.
Yep.
That's okay. I love it because it kind of just reminds me of like classic Pulp Fiction, like all the time. Like it's so pulpy in its nature, which is what is Star Wars genre speaking.
Yeah. I mean that soundtrack when they're riding on the blurgs, like on horseback, and the soundtrack gets very 60s. I mean, it's definitely, we're in Pulp Fiction territory, but it's got
exactly
so many layers.
It's supposed to feel like kind of a tiny bit campy, like a little
absolutely
bit, and it absolutely hits that. Like people were tweeting about how it reminded them of Xena and Hercules.
Okay.
Like, and there was a comedian who was like, it just reminds me of Xena and Hercules. Like, it's perfect. It doesn't have to be more than that. But it is more than that because there's so much mythos and like interesting concepts being introduced in the subtext, you know?
Yeah.
And especially like what it says metatextually is just absolutely fabulous. Any comments on any of the characters in particular?
I mean, I think it's very meaningful that Quill says, you know, I have lived for, you know, I toiled in the Imperial servitude for 3 of your human lifetimes, which immediately screams prequels, original trilogy, and sequel trilogy, you know, the 3 eras, the 3 Skywalker men, you know, Anakin, Luke, and Kylo, you know, Ben. That, to me, that's pretty fascinating.
He's telling us what is about to happen is important from a metatextual perspective to tell us to understand, hey, you know, I've been there.
We keep hearing Kathleen Kennedy give these little interview sound bites about, you know, we're on the verge of a new era where we have to figure out what Star Wars is after the Skywalkers are essentially gone or whatever, you know. And yeah, this episode feels very aware of that. You know, if when he says three human lifetimes, you know, it gives you a sense of the enormity of mythology and time. You know, like Baby Yoda. You know, Baby Yoda is a bridge to, you know, people have said on Twitter like, "Oh, I'm horrified at the thought that Baby Yoda is going to outlive all of our favorite characters." And it's like, yeah, I mean, you're right. And
so will the myth.
Yeah.
Like Baby Yoda. I have to say this out loud because I have not yet. Baby Yoda is not only like the inner child of our Mandalorian, but Baby Yoda is also the representation of the core of the myth of Star Wars. He's the unnamed species that George Lucas himself invented. We hear Yoda's theme in a childlike wonder every time Baby Yoda is doing something. Baby Yoda is Star Wars, this new reborn Star Wars. And it's really important that, like, from a meta perspective, we are literally having the storytellers saying we must protect the child at all cost. We must protect the core of the myth at all cost, even though it's fledgling and new.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, you have people, when they talk about the new era of Star Wars, you know, one of their concerns is, of course, the fact that Lucasfilm is a division situated within this massive, massive global corporation of Disney, and people are like, you know, they're sort of afraid of like, oh, so does that mean that, you know, Bob Iger is writing the scripts for these movies, you know, or whatever, you know, and of course, like Lucasfilm is still located at the Presidio, you know, it's still the same people who worked on the prequels in many cases, or people that Kathy brought in. So, I mean, it is like its own autonomous Lucasfilm, but there is this like there's this worry in the you know, the public consciousness, that the audience, you know, people who, you know, they're like, you know, you've got the people who just reject it. You know, they're like Disney Star Wars. You know, that's not my expanded universe that I loved. So there is this sense that, like, you know, Lucasfilm is this precious thing, right, within Disney, and people are afraid of Disney because it's a, you know, the big.
It is an empire.
It is an empire. Yeah. It is.
Yeah, and I think that is, you know, people have been intimidated by, you know, what necessarily the story has been, I think. I have a lot of thoughts about The Rise of Skywalker, and this episode will come out before that episode, so that's okay. But, you know, come back to hear my thoughts on The Rise of Skywalker when those get released on the Monday after this episode. Okay, we carry on. They end up, you know, bringing just the perambulator to Werner Herzog and those amazing scenes. And we get the most epic introduction to Moff Gideon, who's like almost like scary from like he looks literally like a villain, like so much. Like he's got a cape, he's wearing his armor, like he talks in these like grandiose terms. What did you think of Moff Gideon?
I mean, his entrance is sort of like Henry Fonda's introduction in Once Upon a Time in the West, very like, when you see him, you have no doubt that he is the big bad villain. He is the reason we're here to this villain. He's all in black like Henry Fonda is in Once Upon a Time in the West, which I strongly suspect, I can't recall if there's confirmation of this, but I think that Henry Fonda's introduction in that movie is probably a huge influence on Darth Vader, the fact that he's clad all in black and just kind of the, when Vader shows up, it's with like fireworks and, John Williams, thunder and just kind of like hands on his hips, it's very like the first time we see Darth Vader in 1977, it's a grand introduction. And I mean, yeah, the TIE fighter like soaring in and the wings folding. Oh, is perfection.
It was a cool TIE fighter.
Yeah, which I think it comes from like the Force Awakens concept art book, like the Phil Shostak art book. I think it's out of the Force Awakens one. That idea.
I love that they
folding.
Like reuse those ideas like for other things. That's so cool.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of stuff in this episode that feels like, oh, that came from somewhere. I'd love to hear the story, I mean, just the fact that the Death Troopers are back and being used again, I think that's my favorite design from Rogue One. Is those sort of Vader type stormtroopers. They just look so great. I think that he feels like he's put a lot of work into this character. His voice doesn't sound like the other roles I've seen Esposito play. It's exciting. He kind of just shows up and right away, the first thing that we know about him is that he doesn't care very much about people outside of his circle, right? Like he'll kill to get what he wants without hesitation, and he's very dangerous. And
he wants our baby myth.
Yes.
He wants our Yoda.
Yeah,
he wants the baby. It was like, and he's almost ruthless, right? Because we see that right away. He's willing to kill and betray even his own people to get what he wants.
Yeah. Like whatever Herzog and Dr. Pershing's goals were, he's not worried about what they thought of that. He wants it, he wants the glory, like Tarkin and Krennic with the Death Star, I'll be taking command of this battle station. And, Krennic's like, what the hell, man? It's kind of that thing where,
it's the classics, like selfish, imperial character.
Yeah.
In some ways, like willing to backstab, willing to take what they want and profit from it in their own reputation or advancement or
yeah, he's very Vader. Right. I mean, like in some ways, like if you, the comic series that has been coming out since like 2015, if you see the way Vader interacts with like the other Imperials, he'll kill a stormtrooper without hesitation. He'll kill, an officer if he has to, he wants to get the job done. And that feels like Gideon in a nutshell.
Yep. And you mentioned before we started recording, like the shoot up really reminded you of Sonny in the Godfather movie.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like the shoot up of the location, and yeah, there was a big mafia feel to that whole exchange, and I mean, to me, that was just really, really interesting. Anything else from a genre perspective that you kind of noticed?
Yeah, I mean, well, the Death Troopers just kind of opening fire and just like, riddling that place with bullet holes. That was a very tropey kind of, I mean, in like Magnificent Seven, the 2016 version, you see that with like a Gatling gun, where you, it's all about the sound design and, we can't possibly defeat this like unstoppable force that just mowed down an entire town or whatever with the
look at all the power and control and that the Empire has.
And what is,
even though they're gone.
The Empire in Star Wars is basically like the gun being pointed at the galaxy constantly, right? It's like the Death Star is like our first look at the Empire in Star Wars, like from a in terms of when these things are released, the Death Star, we got the Death Star 2,
Well, also just like the opening shot of A New Hope, you have the little tiny Tantive 4 and you have the giant Star Destroyer like chasing after it. It feels very hopeless. And then there was the kind of chasing as the speeders were like chasing after Quill on the blurg with Baby Yoda in hand, and it felt very much like there's this chase scene in Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress.
Oh, yeah.
Which the chase speeder scene in Return of the Jedi is based on. It felt like the quick cuts between the blurg and the speeders to like kind of and the like long lens that's used at certain points felt very much Kurosawa in that like little segment. And then like the tight pan into Baby Yoda lying on the ground, like,
yeah,
as Quill got shot, right?
Yeah. He gets kind of swooped up in a hurry. I
just don't feel like they killed him. Maybe they did. We'll find out. I don't know. I don't think he's too cool.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, the more I think about it, the less I think he's dead. Because it looks like smoke is rising from his body, but like as the shot kind of lingers, you realize it's probably just dust blowing up from the speeder,
Yeah, or it hit his armor or whatever, like, because he's wearing kind of padding.
Yeah.
A little bit, like, or Baby Yoda heals him, or IG-11's like, here's a med pack.
Yeah.
Here's some back to salve.
Yeah. I definitely had the thought,
like,
he's basically IG-11's father. So if IG-11 has any awareness of what's happened and is able to like wield guns, which, I suspect he does, on some level, I think that, he's going to be like, what have you done? Like, I'm going to protect my father or whatever, avenge him, or in the next episode, I would have to imagine, just because of that whole relationship that they spent so much time setting up.
Yeah. Like I do, oh man, especially with like IG-11, like basically having a death rebirth. There's a lot of that theme happening from a mythic perspective as well. Like, so he's been reborn as his new self and almost had to learn, and he's still fundamentally the same thing, but he has been reborn. And then he's still not trusted. He's still in the guise of what he still looks exactly like what our Mandalorian is afraid of, and that's really significant to me, because it feels very like, Vader, Ben Solo-ish, like he still looks like the same old bad guy reborn, or, Empire, First Order, like these things still feel the same. Maybe they're slightly different. There's definitely that, like, he was reborn but is still kind of the same, maybe a different personality. So IG-11 experiences like this incredible like death and rebirth within the course of the show so far. And I mentioned, like, I called it, but like I'm not trying to be braggy. It just felt like that was what was going to happen. He wanted to kill Baby Yoda, and so to be reborn, he had to almost learn again as far as what the story was going to be and how it was going to be. And the whole awesome experience of seeing him kind of go through his learning and have Quill talk about his background while we kind of see this montage of IG-11 learning how to exist again was, I don't know, incredibly satisfying. It was like a redemption on screen in a way. And this episode in general calls to the themes of death and rebirth and like how you move past, the past a lot. We have the Empire that is, crawling from a death perspective, almost like, still plaguing the galaxy. And we have this new life in the form of Baby Yoda that we absolutely want to protect from kind of the old ways. It's in some ways like we absolutely need to let the past die to be able to be reborn. And it's just really interesting to see that death and rebirth theme that played so heavily in The Last Jedi repeated multiple times throughout this episode. What did you what do you think of that?
I don't know. It's nice. It's interesting how in the Disney era we've seen like droids kind of take on
way more humanity. Yeah.
Yes, more humanity. Exactly. Couldn't have said it better. Like in the way that technology was seen as kind of this, you know, in the very first like rough draft that George Lucas did that's been adapted to like a comic book and stuff, you know, with what was it? Was it Kane Starkiller? You know, basically inspired the look of Saw Gerrera in Rogue One. This idea of like, look at me, like there's hardly any of me left, and he like tears his shirt off, and he's like all cyborgy and Vadery underneath in the rough draft comic. And I mean, we've kind of moved away from that idea that like we turn it on our heads and stuff like that. Like you know, IG is this, he's like a baby, like Baby Yoda, even though he's just a machine made to kill, you know?
Yeah. Well, and like Quill says, like they reflect the personalities of their creators.
Yeah.
And like the people that are around them. And I can't help that like the theme of having like these fledgling things very much reflects in some ways like us as new fans trying to understand the myth and trying to, you know, see what's going to happen. And like even Quill is like, you know, he made mistakes and he learned from those, you know, and droids themselves have been incredibly humanized in the Disney era, like to your point, but they're very representative of slaves. They are the absolute bottom rung of every society. They are, you know, even George Lucas had said they are the equivalent of toasters. And that's why like very few people genuinely care about droids, their emotions, the fact that they can feel pain and suffering, but they can. Droids all have these experiences. And the fact that we have almost like this death and rebirth of IG-11 is incredibly significant.
Yeah, I think it's meaningful that like the tribe, the Mandalorian tribe that, you know, our heroes a part of it's kind of this this class of people who have been kind of moved into hiding and oppression, you know, where once they thrived and were, you know, all about triumphant, you know, war stuff, you know, like now they're kind of like living underground like rats or whatever Favreau's character says.
Yeah, and like trying to maintain the traditions of the past under the, you know, basically almost being eliminated.
So it's nice and rich and complex that he has like this prejudice against droids when, you know, he is himself kind of a minority class, you know, a little bit at this point in sort of the galactic, you know, it's a messy state of affairs, like in the Mandalorian, as far as like galactic politics and the Outer Rim being kind of like a lawless frontier. Where was I going with that?
And then also, you know, the desire to possess this child of power, and you know, just a quick aside before we get into kind of what that means, I think it's really interesting that we got the Baby Yoda force choking Cara too.
Yeah, that was fun. It was kind of silly, but like it showed that you know, again, like the programming idea, right? Like IG-11 does what he's programmed to do, whereas Baby Yoda has this incredible power, but he has to be taught, right? Like if he's an infant with like this Yoda-like power, he's kind of inherently dangerous, right?
Yep, like he in and of himself is power, the whole thing, and he can do good or he could do bad, and we see both of those happen within the course of events within the episode. We see him attempt to choke Cara Dune, but then he is able to heal his, you know, well, potentially, you know, bad guy, right? Like in Griff Karga.
Yeah.
And the fact that the, you know, remnants of the Empire want to possess the power of this means that they want to use the power, like all bad people, for, not good means. Whatever that is. We don't even know yet. Maybe we'll find out next episode, but I suspect that we might not. We might not. It might be like kind of a mystery that goes into the second season, is like, why are these people after Baby Yoda? We might not find out, but that desire for power and control is always, selfishness. Always.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Wanting people to exist, and like you can almost see that play out with Baby Yoda in the basic conversation about selfishness versus selflessness. Baby Yoda, wants to not have the Mandalorian hurt, so he reaches out to try to protect the Mandalorian, but it's probably for his own reasons. Like he's trying to do something, and then out of compassion to the experiences of Griff being poisoned, he goes and heals Griff. It's really interesting that we're getting like almost even speechless versions of Force morality.
Yeah. Mando does like correct him and kind of gives him a lesson when he says like, no, she's my friend. Like, he doesn't just kind of like, stop him from choking her and then like move on. Like he explains like, no, like she's good. She's with us, which is interesting.
Do you think we'll get a word by the end of the season from Baby Yoda?
His voice has kind of changed in the course of the series, like, almost.
From the cooing to the kind of quacking sound like he almost made. And the sound designers talking about how it's like a little bit of a human voice, one of the sound designers themselves, and then mixed with like some animals to like give it that kind of quality.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It does feel like a two-parter where a lot of it's going to be about the conflict with Moff Gideon.
And like the resolution of the open questions, like, what happens to Baby Yoda? What happens to Quill? Is IG-11 going to walk out of that? What's Cara Dune going to do? Like, what is our Mandalorian himself going to do? I think there's a lot of those open questions that we will need the answers to be able to judge this episode and the next episode together, because it's continuous storyline. It's not like it's it left on a cliffhanger, so it'll open up where it left off, right?
I feel like Fennec Shand should show up, right? Because Gideon presumably was the one walking up to like discover her laying there in the desert, and so I feel like she's gonna show up. Maybe I would like that. I can't really believe that like that great character was used for like 4 minutes of screen time and then just disappeared.
Yeah, I don't
buy that.
Unless we genuinely see people that don't stand up, like Snoke in The Last Jedi. Like I don't believe anybody dies in Star Wars. I don't believe anyone dies in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the baby. He's being, carried away to safety as fast as he can. He's being hunted by the Empire on the speeder bikes, picked up, now in peril. We have shot Quill at the end. We have this amazing sort of speech by Moff Gideon.
Yeah.
I think that's all we can say about the episode, other than our new formed love for our internal child is in danger. And like you can see the internet reacting to that. Like they're very concerned about what's going to happen to Baby Yoda.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like, what was it, last episode? Was episode 6 where we saw Baby Yoda get dropped and it was like, oh, my heart. And now he's been taken by the Empire and then cut to black. So, definitely this is the most like anxious I've been about like, okay, let's get to the next episode now,
Yeah, and we had to wait.
We have to wait, what, like 9 days or something for it?
8 days. But by the time this episode comes out, it'll be a week. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm very much looking forward to seeing this episode and the next episode kind of almost in continuum. and
Yeah,
understanding
watch
kind
them
of,
as one.
yeah, like what is it trying to say back to back? And this series itself will be very interesting to see and replay. And it's, very doable to replay. I think it'll only take, because each episode is like between 30 and 40 minutes ish.
Yeah.
Like it's only like 3 hours or something.
Yeah, I could see it feeling kind of like a little movie, like these 2 episodes.
Yeah.
If they do it, similarly. And we got Taika Waititi is the director on the final one, finale.
I believe so. Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. That'll be an interesting contrast with Chow's style, I think. But it could really work. Obviously, he's the one who cares the most about IG-11 as a character, I'm sure. So it's probably a very IG-11 heavy episode, I'd imagine. But yeah,
I mean, theoretically, yeah. The last episode, Chapter 8, is in this season, of course, because it has been renewed. But the Mandalorian comes face to face with an unexpected enemy. Ooh.
Oh, interesting. Unexpected enemy. Oh, so maybe that's the Fennec Shand wish that I was hoping for, but
yeah,
or it could be something completely new as well. It could be that Boba Fett theory that everybody wanted. But I'm gonna give that one a 0.01% chance of likelihood. But
yeah, and this one was also written by Jon Favreau, and yes, you were correct on who is.
It's Taika's episode.
Taika's,
gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
Taika Waititi. I'm very much looking forward to viewing this whole thing back to back. And yeah, any further thoughts?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that like a lot of the, Clone Wars and Rebels content that I go back to and revisit again and again tend to be those sort of like 2 to 4 part, arcs or whatever, those sort of, that work as kind of a pair or a trilogy. So I imagine, these last couple episodes of the Mando will feel that way. So yeah, I look forward to experiencing it as a complete story and not just with the cliffhanger of Baby Yoda getting taken. But I really enjoyed it. I think it was the best episode yet.
Awesome. So thank you, Alex, for joining me to talk about Chapter 7, The Reckoning. And where can people find you?
On Twitter at Alex J. Kane, Kane, or at various websites like PC Gamer, Forbes, StarWars.com.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is orchestral music composed by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force: Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, Susan, Jessica, Cassandra Corvid, Brad, Black-Eyed Lily, Anna Perez, Raylo Musings, and Jawa Dog. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or any of your other pod apps. It helps people find the show. You can connect with us on Twitter at What the Force Show, at What the Force Podcast on Facebook, or on our website, whattheforce.ca. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.